Welcome to Codex, a history of video games. I'm Mike Coletta.
And I'm Tyler Osby.
And today we're covering Chapter 12 in the Ultimate History of Video Games, Volume 2, by friend of the podcast, Stephen L. Kent.
Yeah. If you haven't bought the book already, we're going to keep telling you to buy it. And if you have bought the book, we're also going to keep telling you to buy it because we don't make separate podcasts for people who buy the book and people who don't.
Should we?
Maybe we should. It's great. You should buy the book. And we kind of discuss the chapters of the book sort of like a book club. We're not like going to read the book to you, but we are going to talk about what goes on in the book, which is, public knowledge of the history of video games. So, yeah. So last week, we talked about some of the good things that Microsoft did, right? Especially in Japan. Spoilers, though. They didn't make a ton of headway in Japan, but the Xbox 360 was miles ahead of the original Xbox in terms of how well it did over there. For starters, they started calling it the 360 and not the No Box, which was a pretty good improvement, if you ask me.
No one likes a No Box.
No one wants a No Box because of what the X symbol means in like Japanese culture. It's kind of like a no or like don't want this. So like, why would you call your box the stupid box? So they call it the 360. And it did a lot better than the original Xbox. It still didn't do great, though. They were going up against Japanese incumbents, Sony and Microsoft. It was always going to be an uphill battle, right? But I think I'd consider that a win. In a future episode, we'll talk about where Microsoft failed with the 360, and oh boy, did they fail in some spectacular ways. But for now, we're going to check in on the corporate goings-on over at Sony, because it's like Succession up in here. If you've watched Succession,
is.
That's a great show, by the way. If you haven't watched Succession, it's on HBO.
Finale's tonight.
Oh, yeah, it is. Ooh, I'm excited for that. So in early 2005, the head of Sony, Nobuyuki Ide, is stepping down from his position as CEO and chairman. So who's going to replace him? Well, if you guessed Sir Howard Stringer, then you'd be right. But you didn't guess Howard Stringer, did you? Because I don't think we've ever said his name on this podcast before. You probably would have guessed Ken Kutaragi, who was the father of the PlayStation, who was already kind of second in command, and he was in charge of one of the biggest divisions at Sony. Well, he kind of got demoted, and he was removed from the board of directors at this time, which is a little bit of a womp womp.
Yeah.
I think there was kind of a feeling that people at the company sort of thought that like gaming might be temporary, or that Ken might not be manager material, even if he is a master of electronics. And you know what? And knowing nothing more than the situation of what's going on in the book, it might have been the right decision, because just because you're good at your job doesn't mean you're going to be a good manager or good at running a company. I've seen managers get promoted because they're good at their job and then have a hard time because they're not good managers. It's a different job. It's like a different skill set, right? Running a company is different than being an electronics wizard that can make awesome PlayStations.
Yeah. Also, if you are like good at PlayStation and you stick with working with PlayStation and gaming, that's only going to help the gaming division. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Ken Kutaragi staying there. Probably why you have so many cool stuff with PlayStation now,
Exactly. It's possible, though, that he got snubbed here, like he was supposed to get it and didn't. Like, I don't know, maybe he would have been really great at it, but I guess we'll never know. Kent tells a story in here about how Kutaragi kind of publicly challenged Nobuyuki Ide, the former CEO, about 6 years before that, when they were kind of talking about the PlayStation 2 at, I think it was E3. Ide said that he'd supported the PlayStation all along, which was totally not true, and Kutaragi kind of called him out on it by saying that Norio Oga, who was the CEO before Ide, was the one who truly supported the PlayStation through thick and thin. So maybe he was still mad about that. I don't know. There's a little bit of speculation also that Kutaragi hadn't really been he had never shown like proper respect to his superiors, which is kind of a thing in Japanese culture, like business culture, of like, if you don't respect your superiors, you're gonna have a bad time, and so that may have stunted his career growth as well.
In the chapter, they mentioned a moment where he was like trying to say something, and he would at a meeting, and he used like his superiors, like the people above him in like the hierarchy of the business, to like translate. And that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, because it's like you're asking your boss to like, they describe it as like being your servant in this meeting. And so little things like that over the course of his long career made it so people didn't think he was that good of a businessman. He was a brilliant like engineer, but not as good of like a businessman person.
Yeah. He took it on the cheek, as is customary, but the father of PlayStation was kind of starting to see his way out of the door here. He didn't really have much more room to go up, so it was either up or out. And we'll probably get to that one of these days, but I don't think we talk about that just yet. Because we're still pre-Xbox 360 launch here, so we're kind of hyping up the next generation of video games.
Yeah, this is like 2004 probably, right?
2005 is about here. Is in early 2005 is when all this stuff was going down. This summer is when the E3 where they revealed the PlayStation 3 is going to happen. And then the Xbox 360 is going to come out in November after that E3. So we're still not in that next generation quite yet, but it's on its way, and everybody knows what's up. So Kent takes a little bit of time to set some context here for the next generation of games that's kind of heating up. By 2005, video games were like getting huge. In the US, Americans spent $10.5 billion on video games. That's billion with a B. It's rising all around the world too, except in Japan, where for some reason dropped $600 million between 2001 and 2005. I'm not exactly sure what was going on there, but maybe we'll dig into that one day. This adoption of video games was driven by the sixth generation of game consoles. That's the Xbox, PS2, and GameCube. And the Xbox and PS2 were great, cheap DVD players during a time of transition from VHS tapes to DVDs. So getting both a game system and a DVD player in one box was like a really great deal for consumers. And that sort of like those two things sort of fed into each other. If you wanted a DVD player, the best thing to get was game console, and if you were trying to buy a game console, it was much easier to justify that because it was also a DVD player, which you probably didn't have yet. So these two things like really work together to make it a great deal to buy the Xbox or PS2. GameCube, not so much.
I still find it so weird that at this time it was cheaper to buy a game console that played DVDs than a straight DVD player that didn't play games.
Yeah, because they're selling them at a loss. You know, they don't need to make money on the thing. And DVD player sellers like Toshiba doesn't make money off of somebody buying DVDs, or at least not most DVDs. So they have to make a profit on the actual player. So it kind of makes sense. I think something similar happened with Blu-ray as well. Like the PS3 for a little while was the cheapest Blu-ray player, or at least comparable. They were about the same price. So it was like, well, I might as well get the PS3 and play games, you know?
Yeah, that makes way more sense.
Yeah. So yeah, there's also a huge cultural phenomenon going on right in these few years here called Grand Theft Auto. So we had Grand Theft Auto 3 came out, which was its own cultural moment. A ton of people bought PS2s and then later bought Xboxes to play those games. And those games, the GTA 3, Vice City, and San Andreas were like, they were just part of the cultural zeitgeist in a way that I don't know if any other video game has been since. It's just absolutely crazy. And we've talked a lot about GTA 3, but like, I don't think there is any single game you can point to that has been more influential to modern gaming than Grand Theft Auto 3. And I think I said that when we talked about GTA before, but like maybe you can make the argument like maybe Doom was more influential, but I think Doom was a little bit too early. I think you got to point to GTA 3. Like basically any game that's out, even today, 20 years later, you can look at and go, yeah, that goes back to GTA 3, you know?
I think GTA 3 brought more people into video games.
Yeah.
Which is why it was so much more. Yeah. People didn't play video games and then like, what's this GTA game? And then that brought them in. It made gamers.
And then they realized they loved gaming. And probably part of what brought it in was all the attention it was getting for being so violent. And that always sells more games. People think that they're like protesting a game when really they're just giving it free advertising. So I also think that this was the first generation where a significant amount of people owned more than one platform. Well, I don't think that. That's actually true. But in the 90s, you kind of got one. You bought a Sega or a Super Nintendo, you bought a Nintendo 64, or you bought a PlayStation. People didn't really get both unless you were like rich and a huge gamer, right? There wasn't much reason to buy both. It was just kind of everybody only had one. Or maybe my view is skewed because as a child, I wouldn't have been able to afford more than one anyway. But in this generation of games, you had to have a PS2 to play GTA. You had to have an Xbox to play Halo. And if you wanted to play Nintendo games, you had to have a GameCube. So a lot of people bought more than one system. Another thing that I think contributed to this is the demographic of people who play games. We're starting to grow up, right? People are those kids that were playing in the 90s are now teenagers and maybe early adults. They're grown up. They've got jobs of their own with more discretionary spending money that they could spend how they wanted to. And so it's not just like, what games can I get mom and dad to buy me, right? It was people buying their own games. I can attest to that. My own multi-platform ownership went way up once I got a job in high school in the mid-2000s. Also, Matt in Japan, famously, we've told the story of him getting a job just so that he could buy a Wii and a PlayStation 3. That was like the main reason he got a job in high school. So, he wanted to buy both of those, and he had a 360 at one point too, I believe, too. So, at one point, I end up, usually at some point in a generation, I'll end up with all three systems, which is just kind of unheard of in the 90s, right?
Yeah, now it's like you got to have it so you can play all the different games because it's exclusives.
Right. And games are very important to me, so I'll spend money on them.
That's right.
So I think there's a lot of things that came together to make that generation of gaming like a really big takeoff moment. Some industry analysts thought that maybe it was just like one-time like alignment of the planets that wouldn't be replicated again. But I think that alignment helped send it straight into the stratosphere, but I don't think it needed to happen again for it to keep going up. And I think that's kind of what we saw, right?
Yeah, I also think that alignment would have happened later if it didn't happen then. Like it was just all the signs are pointing to that happening. Yeah.
But there are some people who would have thought, well, that's the bubble and now it's going to burst and people aren't going to want to buy more things. Like maybe they thought of the video game industry entirely as the same way that like music games were or rhythm games like with plastic controllers, right? There was at one point you could look at that and go, holy moly, this is the future of gaming. And now, of course, looking back on it, was very clearly like a bubble, but you can't tell afterwards. So
side tangent. I didn't realize that no one is making new plastic peripherals for Rock Band. So if you want Rock Band now, it's expensive to
really?
Go on eBay and buy a guitar controller. Yeah. They're like $100 still. Yeah.
That's so funny because you go to Goodwill, at least for a little while, they were everywhere at Goodwill. They couldn't give those things away.
I think it's now like switched where the Goodwill ones are gone and it's like expensive to get one again.
That's so funny.
To get like a drum set for Rock Band is pretty pricey. Like it's going to cost you over $100.
Dang. Wow. Huh.
Yeah, I just thought that was wild because I'm like, I feel like that and like Wii peripherals, with a tennis racket that you put the Wiimote into, just ruining dumpsters all over the country, just flooded with these plastic parts.
Yeah, they don't actually do anything.
Yeah.
They do literally nothing. Plastic
Absolutely
golf
nothing.
club. Jeez.
Yeah.
Those ones that stuff was really dumb because you didn't even need it. It wasn't.
Yeah,
it
was
didn't
pointless.
add anything. It just made you feel better, I guess, if you felt like less of an idiot with a golf club wrapped around your Wiimote.
The only one I would say that made sense was the Wii wheel, but you could even just play with the controller on its side and just turn it left and right. You didn't even need it. It just felt right because it was a wheel.
The wheel made a little bit more sense, I think.
Yeah, but if you want to get if you want a Guitar Hero guitar, it's going to cost you money on eBay to get one. So
that's crazy.
They got to be in Goodwill's though still somewhere,
Yeah,
Watch,
I'm sure
we
you could
get
find
this,
it
and
somewhere.
then those video game collectors we have on Discord, our old man Ryans, all those folks, they're gonna be like, you can get these for $20 here, and they're just gonna show like 800 of them in their garage or whatever.
Love it.
Maybe that's it. Maybe old man Ryan secretly got an underground.
He's got the market
Guitar
corner
Hero
on
business.
Plastic Guitar Hero. Yeah.
All right,
This guy.
there you go.
This is that's a good hustle. I respect it.
I do too.
All right. But time marches on, and so does the progress of video games because it never ends. And Microsoft was first in the 7th generation of game consoles. I mean, they released first. We mentioned this last week, but getting the jump on competition has huge advantages, as evidenced by how the PS2 completely destroyed the 6th generation of game consoles. But it also has disadvantages when you're first, in that the competition now knows your strengths and weaknesses, right? But you don't know theirs just yet. So Sony knows just how to measure the PS3 to make it seem better than the 360 because they know what the 360 is, they know what its benchmarks are, what numbers Microsoft is touting, and now they can look at what they have and say, okay, what numbers can we pull from here that make the PS3 look way better than the Xbox 360, which is just something Microsoft didn't have. And then Nintendo, at this point, knows how different it's going to be, and so it knows what it needs to market to show how different it is. But I mean, kind of, let's be honest here, Nintendo's just going to Nintendo anyway. And I think by the time the Wii rolled around, they weren't really competing directly with anybody but themselves, right?
That should be their corporate motto. The Nintendo's going to Nintendo.
Yeah, they just kind of went off and did their own thing and, worked great.
Yeah.
But even as Microsoft showed specs and games of the Xbox 360, they kept quiet about the pricing and the launch date. They didn't want to have their E3 1995 moment with Sony like Sega did. Do you remember E3 95, the PlayStation? $299. Yeah, we talked about this in our like top E3. That might have been was that our number one E3 moment?
I think it was. I think that was. And to a lot of people, that's their number one E3 moment because that's like you got some business drama going on. Yeah, you got like a big reveal for customers.
For those that don't know, that was the E3 in 1995 when I think it was 95 when Sega got up there. They start talking about how great the Saturn's going to be, and they're showing all the cool stuff. And they're like, and it's going to be $399, $400. And immediately afterwards, when Steve Race gets up on stage for Sony to talk about the PlayStation, he walks up there. All he says is $299, and he walks off stage. And the crowd went wild, and Sony won, and they didn't even have to show anything. So Microsoft learned from that. They were like, we're not going to tell you the price just yet because we don't want you to just undercut us and win based on that, you know? So they kept it close to their chest. But otherwise, they put on a big spectacle at E3 in 2005. And they pushed forward that excess that would kind of exemplify the conference in the coming years. Like there's a time in like the late 2000s where E3 was just like really extravagantly like just bad, and it like was not fun for anybody. So, yeah. We talked a little bit about the history of E3, I think, before. So if you're curious about how that conference has kind of evolved over the years, you should check those episodes out. At E3 2005, Microsoft went big, and Nintendo similarly looked towards the future. The GameCube was basically dead, and Nintendo didn't really want to talk about anything but the revolution, which is what the Wii was called at the time still. And they also wanted to talk about the DS. Nintendo knew they couldn't compete on hardware specs, so they didn't. They didn't talk about how great their graphics would be or how many gigaflops their system had. They talked about games. Reggie talked up how Nintendo had sold over 2 billion games in their lifetime, so clearly they're the best. They've sold the most games out of anybody. So don't even worry about the Hertzes and the stuff that the other system has, right? They ain't got no games. And as we all know, if you ain't got no games, you're not going to win the console wars.
That's right. That's why the Codex console that comes out will have 4,000 games at launch.
Right. That's right. It's just a PC.
It's a PC, and they're all games from old Nokia phones and like flash games from Newgrounds. We're no licenses. We're stealing. We're just straight up stealing.
They did talk about the Game Boy Micro, which did have games. It had all of the GBS library. In fact, it actually doesn't have backward compatibility. The Game Boy Micro does not.
Really?
Yeah. So that sucks, I guess.
I thought this was interesting because it was like a little tidbit in the chapter being like, yeah, and they announced this Game Boy Micro that just failed really quickly.
Yeah, well, it came out after the DS came out. It was like, what are you doing? I would just buy a DS and play my Game Boy games on the DS, you know?
It almost makes me wonder if they made the Game Boy Micro and they were just like, well, we made it, so we might as well just put it out there and see what happens.
Yeah,
you know?
I think maybe it was it was like super cheap. It was like $100, I want to say. And so maybe it was like, here, buy this and hand it to your kid and they'll stop crying during car rides or something. And it'll be cheaper than a DS.
Game Boy still.
Yeah,
I'm always
so
crying
you don't
during
cry
car rides.
on the car ride.
That's right.
Yeah. So no one really cared about the Game Boy Micro. It had a backlit screen, rechargeable battery. It had faceplates too. You could change the faceplates. No one cared. You know, there was a period of time in like the mid 2000s or maybe early mid 2000s where like changeable faceplates was like the thing where you could snap your faceplates on and off of your things. Like the 360 did that. The Game Boy Micro did it. Yeah, cell phones did it.
Right, the front of the 360, you could pull that. In my case, it was a white plate off, and they would have like a Halo themed one or like different colors. Yeah.
I don't know anybody that ever did it.
I don't know anyone either.
I don't even know how to pop it off.
It's amazing it even existed. You know, I remembered it because I don't remember anyone doing it. I remember the only people that probably did get it were people that bought consoles with the nameplate included. Yeah. With the special plate included, you know?
Or they bought like the special deluxe edition of a game that like came with a faceplate, but nobody like bought faceplates for their 360.
No.
I don't think. If you did, send us an email. We'll correct ourselves, I guess.
Yeah. We're going to get like 800 emails. You're wrong.
You're wrong. I bought all the faceplates.
I am the king of faceplates.
Nintendo did show off the Revolution. They talked about how small it was. They're like, it's the size of 3 DVD cases stacked on top of each other, which is pretty small, I guess. They knew that Sony and Microsoft would kind of have gigantic chonkers of consoles. And since the Revolution couldn't compete on specs, it could compete on size. So that's what they kind of showed. They didn't show the controller yet, but they did hint that the Revolution was about something other than graphics, which they assured you the graphics were still good. They're still going to be good graphics. But they did not talk up how they would be better than the competition. They're like, we'll talk about the controller later. So it's like, okay, Satoru Iwata, keep your secrets, you know.
You got your secrets.
Yep.
But we all know the Revolution will not be chonky, and that's what's important.
That's right. So now it was Sony's turn to present at E3, and your boy Ken Kutaragi talked about the PSP. He was feeling pretty good about that. It was doing okay. Compared to the DS, it wasn't beating the DS, but it was doing fine. But everyone was here for the real news, which was the PlayStation 3. So Kutaragi said that it would offer backward compatibility, which was just like the Xbox 360 did. Microsoft announced at that E3 that the 360 would play the top-selling original Xbox games. I want to say it plays like a little over half of the original Xbox's library, and pretty much all of the good games. If you got if there's a game that's good on the original Xbox, it probably plays on the 360. And then the Revolution would play all GameCube games. I don't know if they said that at E3, but that would have happened. So Ken Kutaragi said that the PlayStation 3 was so much better because it reached back 2 generations instead of just 1, because it would play PlayStation 1 games also, which is kind of unfair to the 360 because Microsoft only had one generation to draw on. But it was true of the Revolution, although no one knew that Nintendo had the Virtual Console plan up its sleeve still. So they would go back through all of the consoles, and even non-Nintendo consoles would play on the Wii, which is pretty cool.
I can't remember if we're going to get more into this, because I remember the backwards compatibility battles.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm wondering if we're going to get into it more later on in the book, because it's a very interesting time.
Yeah, and it got worse as time went on for the PlayStation, because they would remove backward compatibility from the PlayStation. Like if you buy a new PS3 now, it'll play PlayStation 1 games. It will not play PS2 games. But an early first launch run of PS2 or PS3 would play PS2 games. And then there was a weird middle ground where they had removed some of the hardware. So it would play PS2 games, but it wouldn't play every PS2 game. It was a very strange time. It's
so confusing. And didn't they do it because they made the PS3 smaller? I know that.
Yeah, but they did remove...
Was that a part of removing it? I don't know.
Yeah, that allowed them to make it smaller, but they also removed it before they made it smaller too. There are fat PS3s that can't play PS2 games. The reasoning was that they didn't do any sort of software emulation of PS2 games at the time. They used that actual PS2 hardware inside the PS3 to do the backward compatibility, which has a cost to it. And so they probably realized at some point that, hey, not very many people are playing PS2 games on their PS3, yet we're still making them with the ability to play PS2 games. And that costs a lot of money. So we can save a lot of money on our consoles if we pull the PS2 hardware out of it. And so that's what they did. And people got mad, but not really that mad. Not mad enough, if you ask me.
Yeah. It was a big deal. I remember in college it being a very big deal. I can't play all these PS2 games.
Yeah. Because I didn't want to have a million consoles hooked up. And there was the PS3 you could hook up with an HDMI cord, so it looked way better. You could not hook a PS2 up with an HDMI cable, so it was a whole thing. And you wanted to play with wireless controllers. There were definitely great reasons to play PS2 games on your PS3. But back to E3 in 2005, it's go time for Sony and Kutaragi, and he could not hold back on the PS3 specs this time. Now that Sony knew what Microsoft had planned, they knew just how to attack them. So they threw out a bunch of numbers. They didn't really mean anything in terms of games. That they sound impressive, and the audience loved it. They said the Cell processor was twice as fast as the Xbox 360 processor. But it was true that Microsoft couldn't beat them on the media that they used. The PS3 was going to be the first console to use Blu-ray discs for games, which the Xbox 360 never did. It had an HD DVD add-on, but it was only for playing movies. There were no games that came out on HD DVDs. So the Blu-ray discs gave Sony 2 advantages. More storage space for games, but it also allowed them an attempt to recreate one of the reasons the PS2 did so well. The PS2 came out right during a format transition for video, and so was the PS3. So Sony hoped that what the DVD did for the PS2, Blu-ray would do for the PS3. And it didn't work quite as well this time, but I'll admit it was a pretty cool selling point, I think. Blu-rays weren't quite as popular to switch to as DVDs were from tapes. So I want to take a slight tangent here to elaborate on that a little bit, but in case for some of our younger listeners who may not have a ton of experience with VHS tapes or DVDs, but back in the day, going from VHS to DVD was a clear upgrade. You didn't have to rewind them anymore. The discs were smaller. The picture quality was obviously way better. And it was just you could skip between chapters. There were special features on DVDs. There were so many reasons DVDs were obviously way better than VHS tapes. But with Blu-ray, the difference wasn't quite so clear. 1080p is a much better resolution than standard definition on DVDs, but not a lot of people seem to care, and not a lot of people had HD TVs at this point in time. So people didn't seem to care enough to upgrade their hardware or pay more for Blu-rays. That was the other thing. You go to the store and buy DVD, it was $20. Blu-ray was $30. And so was that extra $10 worth the extra Blu-ray features like HD? And Blu-rays did a lot of cool stuff that most movies would never use. There was some interactivity stuff that they could do. But anyway, the point is, going from VHS to DVD, obviously awesome. Going from DVD to Blu-ray, not quite as clear what the benefit was. And then there was the whole Blu-ray versus HD DVD format war that is also very interesting. A lot of people just sort of wanted to wait that out and just see which one would be the winner before they sort of committed. And then they found while they were waiting that their DVDs were still good, and it was only a couple more years until streaming would start to become the obvious future. So Blu-ray, rest in peace. I mean, they're still around, I guess, but and they are still the best way to get like the highest possible picture quality for your movies, but nobody buys Blu-rays. So anyway, thanks for listening to Codex, a history of video of home video formats with Tyler. Now back to video games.
I like that little mini podcast we just had. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I remember the big thing being like no one had the TV to make it work. It
was like why would I buy Blu-rays?
No point. Yeah.
Yeah. And like if you bought a when you bought a DVD, you could share it with your friends because everybody had a DVD player. When you bought a Blu-ray, you couldn't like share that with your friends if they didn't also have a Blu-ray player, which is why a lot of Blu-rays also included the DVDs, was so that you could like kind of let your friends borrow. And
I feel like I've watched 3 Blu-ray discs on my Xbox One in the amount of time I've owned it, which is since like 2015.
Yeah.
Like it's 3 movies that are Blu-ray.
I have a few 4K Blu-rays. They do look really, really good. But honestly, I don't know if I'd be able to tell the difference between a 4K Blu-ray and just like something that's 4K from Netflix. So maybe that's my old man eyes that can't tell the difference, but I don't know. Putting a disc in is a whole thing. It's a loading. It's just, nobody wants to do it anymore. Whole thing. But there's great reasons to not use Blu-rays anymore. So yeah. Anyway, we talk about the PS3 hardware some more here. The PS3 used NVIDIA graphics, unlike both the Wii and 360, which used ATI graphics, now AMD. Sony always had a knack for naming things. They called the GPU on the PS3 the RSX Reality Synthesizer, which I think is just a really cool name. Like the PS2 cool had name. Emotion Engine. It had graphics synthesizer. I always like that Sony would do that. I wish consoles would keep doing that. It kind of gives kids like something to fight about on the playground, right? Well, your Xbox sucks because it doesn't have Emotion Engine, like blast processing on Sega. I love that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Give the nerds something to fight about on the playground.
Right. Yeah. They brought in some other industry folks to talk it up, but the takeaway from Sony's presentation was basically, now that the 360 is almost out, it's old news. The PS3 is going to be new, and it's going to be better in every way. Plus, it's going to play Blu-rays, so deal with it. They also showed some games too. Fight Night 3 looked pretty great. They showed a tech demo, the infamous tech demo of Final Fantasy VII, which would fuel fan rumors for over a decade afterwards, actually 15 years until that Final Fantasy VII remake would actually come out. Although they did set expectations when they put that out there. They weren't like, we're making a remake. They did the tech demo and they're like, we are definitely not making a remake. So, but people loved it. It was really cool.
Yeah, I feel like it fueled it for so long. It's just, Because I remember people going, did you see the Final Fantasy VII? They're remaking it, even though they said there wasn't a remake. No, they're remaking it. Why would they make a video? They didn't remake it.
Yeah. Okay. Like, okay. And I
will enjoy the next 15 years of misery.
Right. Yeah. Because they're not working on this right now. Basically, what they did was they took the opening cutscene from Final Fantasy VII and they ran it in real time on the PS3 hardware. And they changed the art style. It looked like Advent Children, which was the pinnacle of like computer generated movies at the time. It looked great. We all wanted FF7. But we wouldn't see it for a long time.
I also, in the book, love Kent's description of the original, where it's like his shoulders were triangles. Yeah. And his face was just one big blob.
Yeah, it was not great. The Final Fantasy VII did not have great graphics. Even by PlayStation 1 standards, they were pretty bad. Like, they would get much better with 8 and 9. This was also the E3 where Sony showed that infamous Killzone 2 demo footage that was definitely not running on a PS3, but they claimed it was. And the whole thing was just it was a mess because for years people would speculate whether it was like real gameplay or not, and it wasn't. And Sony embarrassed themselves pretty badly with it, I think. And I think that's on one of our top E3 moments too, because
I remember that.
Yeah, it was.
You just started a whole new conspiracy theory that no like game demos are actually running on the hardware. They're just video. They just Sony created a monster with that. Yeah.
And you know what? I think there's some truth to that. I mean, I'm not going to say they never run tech demos on the actual hardware, but it's definitely not the only time that a tech demo was not run on the actual console hardware.
Definitely. So, and I think they have that little thing at the bottom now where it's like not in-game footage or whatever.
Yeah, they tell you now. But yeah, so then they revealed the hardware and what it looked like. And if you thought the original Xbox was a big boy, the PS3 was absolutely enormous, which is kind of strange considering Japanese sensibilities about small electronics. But it did birth the meme of the PS3 George Foreman grill, which is pretty funny.
I love it. Yeah, I love it so much.
I love this, like the way they showed it at E3 in 2005, because it's like somebody who didn't design consoles decided to put ports on the back of it, because they're like, it's going to have 2 HDMI ports for what? Outputting to 2 screens at a time, I guess. And they're like, it's going to have 3 Ethernet ports. It's like, why do you need 3? Why do you need more than 1? Why would you put 3 on there? If you put 2 on there, I could, like, maybe you could sort of make a case. Like, I don't know, there's some sort of case you could maybe make there. But like 3? Why would you put 3 Ethernet ports? So I'll never understand.
It's too many. Too many Ethernet ports.
And they showed a strange controller that was like a regular PlayStation controller, but it looked like a boomerang. It was like, it would look really uncomfortable. And I'm super glad they never like released that controller to market, because it looked like it was not fun to hold. I
feel like controllers have now fully evolved to like, we're all happy with what they are now.
Yeah. Yeah. They don't need to change so much between generations. Like they're all just kind of refinements.
I was talking to a friend because we were playing a game yesterday where I was just like, man, the Pro controller of the Switch it feels so nice to me. It's just a great controller. Yeah. I love it. So now we're actually going to talk about the approaching Xbox 360 launch. And Bill Gates had recently just had a cover Time magazine story with him talking about the Xbox 360 and how it was looking to change who plays video games. And needless to say, it put Sony and Nintendo executives on guard for the impending launch of the 360. And to add insult to injury, Microsoft wasn't releasing Halo 3 as a launch title. They were not doing that, right? They would not have Halo 3 out in November of 2005. They're going to release Halo 3 in spring 2006, right when Sony launches the PS3. There's even a quote from Bill Gates saying, quote, "It's perfect," Gates says, radiant with bloodlust. "The day Sony launches, they walk right into Halo 3.
Radiant with bloodlust is a good sentence.
Yeah, that's a great sentence. This was a little quote in the book that I just loved. But Ken gives us some interesting sales facts about 2005 game sales, specifically how Madden 2006 took the top spot in the top 10 best-selling games of 2005. And it really helped video game lobbyists because they had been battling with GTA fever in 2004. And again, we're going to go back slightly to like the violence in video games thing. It was a really tough for ESRB people who are actually kind of lobbyists in Washington to say video games aren't violent when you have GTA around. And I should say that even though Madden 2006 took the top spot, God of War came out at this point. And in God of War, not only is that game really bloody, apparently there's a thing where it's like a mini game where he goes into a bed with 2 women and then the audio just turns on and you know what's going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, that was the whole thing.
Yeah, it's not like really video games had toned themselves down. It's just that the GTA fever was waning because they didn't have a new one yet. So it was a little bit easier for them in this year to like lobby for video games as them not being super violent. On August 17th, Microsoft actually announced the price of Xbox 360 at the German Games Convention. So it would be $299 for a wired controller with no hard disk drive. And then $399 for the 20 gigabyte model hard disk drive with a wireless controller. And I personally completely forgot that when it launched, you could have a wired controller.
Yeah.
I forgot about this entirely. They went wireless with everything, I think, very shortly after this, though.
Yeah, definitely. I still have a wired 360 controller somewhere. I think I bought it to use on my PC because it took them a while to come out with the wireless adapter for PCs.
That would be the reason why, because you have a wired mouse because it's faster input still.
Yeah, right? Some people will probably say that. I bet that they wouldn't be able to tell the difference if you ask.
Really?
At least with a controller, but I don't know.
All right. Yeah, I didn't know either. I'm like, maybe that's why. I don't know. People still buy wired controllers for PC gaming, but so anyway, in September of 2005, at the Tokyo Game Show, this is where Microsoft announces the release date as November 22nd in North America, December 2nd in Europe, and December 10th in Japan. That's right. Japan's getting the console last, and they're really pushing this American release. And that was kind of the thing that other companies like Sony and Nintendo were nervous about, is Microsoft has a strong foothold in North America. And in their mind, they're like, we may have already lost North America just because Bill Gates is like the North American Shigeru Miyamoto, not with games, but as like being a famous person in tech. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now they got to battle with that. There's a spotlight on some cool games too that Kent mentions in this chapter that I think is really like deserves our attention. First, we need to do a quick nod to Gears of War because they mention it briefly in this. And that's a series that Tyler and I love and we played together. And I just thought it was really cool they're mentioning it. And I'm hoping we get more into it in the book later on, because it became like the other franchise for Xbox.
Yeah. It was like the Halo, especially in the time between launch of the 360 and Halo 3, because I'm sorry if this is spoilers, but the planned spring 2006 launch for Halo 3 we were just talking about, not going to happen. That game's not coming out till fall 2007.
Yeah.
So
that's the old
it got delayed.
Oh, no.
Got the delay.
So,
the classic
point is,
year-long Halo delay.
In the history sense, they don't know that it's Sony and Nintendo yet, so they're scared. Right. What's going to happen, right? So I love the discussion, though, about the first of the two Rare games they talk about, which is Cameo. And we're getting into these 360 games that Rare did now. And Cameo is interesting because it was kind of like their answer to Dynasty Warriors. Have you ever heard of Cameo or played Cameo?
Kind of briefly. I've definitely heard of it. I didn't really play it, though.
So from watching videos on it, and I watched some and read some reviews of older, because if you want to play this, by the way, it's on Rare Replay on Xbox. You can play this now if you want to.
I should give it a shot.
Yeah, it's on there. It's kind of a mix of Dynasty Warriors, as in you have these big elaborate battles and you're going through them and stuff, but then there's also moments where you're like doing puzzles with these elemental spirits you unlock through Cameo, who is the elf you play as. Looks like a really cool game, and a lot of videos online were like, what happened to Cameo? Like, people really like this game, and then it just kind of like fizzled away from Rare's library. And it kind of feels a lot like a Nintendo game on a 360, is how it was described.
I bet they started making it when they were still a Nintendo developer.
Oh, you know what? I'm so happy you said that, because the next game they discuss is Perfect Dark Zero, which, while reviewed okay, is now looked on in like a not so positive light. But what I want to focus on is the footnote on page 291, which says, quote, Rare had been developing a true sequel to GoldenEye, but had to abandon the project when Electronic Arts secured the rights to James Bond. Yeah, we could have gotten GoldenEye 2.
Damn.
And then they lost the rights. Speaking of like working on things at Nintendo when they happened. Imagine what it could have been, What it would have been like. We would have had GoldenEye with bots,
Oh, man. What a time to be alive.
I know, right? I just thought it would be so cool. I read that footnote. A lot of times in this book, too, I'm reading the footnotes, and the footnotes have some really cool facts in them. So, while the Rare acquisitions seem to be paying off at Microsoft, Ken argues that the launch titles for the 360 were actually pretty lackluster. There was no, quote, must-play app to sell the console. The three exclusives were Cameo, Perfect Dark Zero, and Amped 3, which is a good snowboarding game, but not one of those must-play games.
I'm gonna have to agree with that one. I think Perfect Dark Zero reviewed as well as it did because it was pretty slim pickings when it came to the launch of the Xbox 360. That was the best game, and so people really wanted to like it. Reviewers really wanted to like it, but if you go back to that game, it does not hold up well.
Yeah, and actually, Kent points out that the best-selling game on the console was Call of Duty 2, mostly because the Xbox 360 was the only way to play it on a console. It came out on Windows, but it did not come out on any other console except for the 360.
Yep.
So what does Microsoft do, to like get some hype going here for these not yet known to be lackluster lineup? Well, they throw a gigantic mid-2000s hype party.
Classic Microsoft.
Classic mid-2000. We're talking the MTV Spring Break of video game launches. 100 lucky fans got to go to the Mojave Desert for a 2-day party, hang out with Jay Allard and Peter Moore. The party was called 0 Hour, and it featured a 32-person game of Perfect Dark Zero and lots of booze, from what we understand.
Sounds great. I would have gone.
An adult party. Yeah, I would have gone too. In the desert, Yep. It was like Burning Man for nerds, is how I would describe it.
Is Burning Man not Burning Man for nerds?
That's a good point. You make a great point. Okay. So as the launch night arrived, the hype grew and people gathered outside of stores for the release. Remember when people did this, by the way, Tyler?
Yeah.
The hype train.
I sort of wish for that time to come back, but I don't, though. I don't.
Yeah, that's true. It's like one of those things where you're like, you have fond memories of like waiting in line for like a movie or an iPhone or a video game console. The last midnight release I went to was for Injustice with my friend, and it was just kind of sad. There was like 5 people in line. We just walked into the store at midnight and picked up the things and left.
Oh, it's so sad. Yeah, they don't make as much sense anymore because everything's digital. So it's like you preload the game and then you launch it at the same time as everybody else. It's like not.
Yeah, digital delivery just killed the midnight release. But
really did.
The Kent actually says there was a profile done about a Best Buy in Manhattan where 200 people lined up and 90 people went home empty-handed because they sold out of consoles, which you'd think would be a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? It's not. And I'm going to read this quote on page 294, and it is from Rob Williams, who wrote for a site called Tech Gauge. And here we go. Quote, since the Xbox 360 was released 2 days ago, there have been numerous reported incidents all over the internet. The primary complaint is that the system is unstable, with games crashing at random, along with the entire system. I can vouch for that because I have had this happen during NFS, Need for Speed Most Wanted, and Project Gotham Racing 3 gameplay. Some have had crashes worse than me. However, some screenshots floating around show many artifacts on the screen after a crash, which forces you to manually shut off the system. Other complaints are related to heat dissipation and noise level, both of which I can verify, again, are very noticeable. I highly doubt that the reported crashes are due to overheating, but rather system instabilities or bad code in the games, end quote.
Uh-oh.
So we have all these tech problems with the Xbox 360 at launch, but on top of that, another tech problem not mentioned in this quote, but that goes back to the original Xbox, is remember the scratching discs in the original Xbox? And they got a lot of complaints in Japan about this specifically, but in reality, it just kind of scuffed the discs, but it didn't hurt the discs. Well, guess what? Now it's scratching the discs and hurting the discs on the Xbox 360. So it would actually leave your games unplayable, some people reported. But with all these tech problems, the consoles sold out in North America, they sold out in Europe, and in Japan we have mixed reviews. There's some store owners that are like, we sold out, and there's some store owners that said, quote, stacks of unwanted 360s on store shelves. So who knows? But Microsoft did end up selling 600,000 units by the end of 2006. And that means from end of November. So they had like almost a little over a month of selling, and they sold 600,000 units, which isn't bad. A little slow, but now the question is, how will Sony, what will they do with the launch of this 360, and how will Microsoft react to Sony's launch in spring? And we'll have to find out next time on Codex History of Video Game.
Nice. Leave them hanging.
Leave them hanging with a little cliffhanger. But Tyler, what you been playing?
Well, no surprise. Been playing a lot of Destiny. Loving that game. We just completed Vault of Glass finally the other night. Man,
that was 3.5 hours of pure fun.
It was a lot of fun, actually.
I actually had so much fun. There's a lot of downtime.
We were getting a little crispy by the end, I think, but we were. I think I can speak for myself. I said I had fun the whole time. And one of our members who was doing it with us for the first time got the gun, Vex Mythoclast, the really rare gun. So,
and we're mad at him still. We're all mad
super
at him,
mad.
right?
Yeah, we've so we're no longer friends with this person.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so I've been playing that. Still playing Ruined King. Loving that. And I feel like there's something else that I had picked. Oh, Halo Infinite. That's what it is. Yeah, I played a couple hours of Halo the other day, and boy, that is really fun. And I'm looking forward to putting more time into it.
Yeah, I've actually been playing Halo also. I'm probably where you're at, actually. I'm just about to go to the surface on the third mission.
Yeah, I've just popped out of the ship, and I'm on Halo now. Zeta Halo.
Oh, so you're a little ahead of me then, because I just beat the boss, so I'm still got to get there. But I'm thoroughly enjoying Halo Infinite. I think the grapple hook is really fun.
Me too.
Like a grapple shot is what it's called. It's very different in how you use it in the campaign versus how you use it in multiplayer, I feel like too. Like in multiplayer, you're using it to do crazy dodge moves around other players so you can get behind them and whack them with a melee attack or just get a better position. Where I feel like in the campaign, I use it mostly to run away if I'm in a bad situation, because I'm playing the game on heroic, because I feel like that's a good difficulty for me with Halo, because it's challenge. You got to think about it still, and it's not too easy. Because I feel like in normal mode you can just kind of run through the whole thing and really just wreck shop. Which if you like that kind of thing, great, But I really dig it, and I've been playing that. I haven't put a lot of time into Zelda this week. I did play with my friend Friday night Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle, the co-op levels.
Oh, how's that? I still never done the co-op levels.
They're really fun. They're really fun. Like, you each get a team of 2 and you work together to do these challenges. And there's no stars you have to earn, so you can just kind of gotta try to beat them. That's all you gotta try to do. It's very simple and it's super fun. And it's like, you got to think about it. And you have teamwork and you like coordinate together. It's like couch co-op. It is awesome.
Nice.
So Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle is making me realize how much I'm going to buy that second one.
Yeah, I'm really excited for it. Spark of Hope, which is like a kind of almost a downer of a title for a Mario game, but
it really is. But that's what the Rabbids do.
Yeah, I guess so. And I guess it's a spark of hope. So it's an upward, but it starts from a downer,
I had to explain to my girlfriend who the Rabbids are, and I really couldn't say. They were like an obscure Rayman bad guy that they're trying to make into minions, kind of. Mm-hmm. That's what they are.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's what we've been doing. Do you want to do some emails?
Yeah, let's read an email here. We got one from Mo. Mo says, "Hey dudes, it's Mo. Hope you had a great turkey day. I ate so much pie." Random question. What video game hero would become the most devastating villain if they turned evil? Mo, and he included a graphic of it says spider butts in Elvish, like Lord of the Rings Elvish.
Yeah, I wish I could like pronounce Elvish so I could read it, but yeah.
Yeah, it just looks like a bunch of peas to me.
I actually was wondering if Halo was going to go this route with Master Chief, like loving Cortana so much that he becomes evil.
Oh, that would be a scary bad guy.
Because you've been playing him for 4 games. He's unstoppable. It's like, I mean, unless of course you're playing him, then you die all the time, and it's like that's how I feel anyway when I play as him.
Yeah. He's not as scary when I play as him.
He's not as scary. He's kind of half scary when I play as him. He succeeds like 2 or 3 times out of 10. So, but yeah, I was thinking Master Chief would be a really good one. What about? Do you have any ideas for like big heroes?
Video game heroes would be bad if they went bad. Well, I mean, we talk about like Big Boss from Metal Gear Solid. He actually does go bad, right? He's a good guy in Metal Gear Solid. There's spoilers for Metal Gear Solid, although it's not really spoilers because it's a prequel. But he's a good guy at the start of Metal Gear Solid 3, and by the end of the Big Boss saga, he is definitely not a good guy, and he is the primary bad guy in the first Metal Gear on the NES. So I'd say he's pretty scary as a bad guy. But if we're talking hypotheticals of like people who haven't turned but would be scary if they did, I'm going to go with Doom Guy.
Oh, yeah. Doom Guy.
Imagine if that guy wasn't ripping and tearing through demons on Mars, but like human people on Earth. That would be awful.
That would also be an adults-only game by the ESRB, probably.
Sure would.
I mean, I'm thinking of like the classic characters too, like Link going bad would be scary, but not. I mean, he's still Link, so it's hard to picture these characters as scary.
Yeah, you got Dark Link from Ocarina of Time, but he wasn't that hard to beat.
It's true. What if Luigi joined forces with Waluigi?
Oh man,
yeah.
I think Luigi has been plotting his revenge for a long time.
That's why he's been playing it so scared in all the Luigi's Mansion games. He's trying to like make it so you don't even think about him, and then bam,
yep,
he's evil. That makes a lot of sense. Well, I think we nailed it. I think we nailed that question. Yeah. If you have ideas about who you want to see as evil, you should email us because that's a really good question, a fun hypothetical.
Yeah,
I'm gonna read this email from Tyler, and the not you Tyler, different Tyler.
Okay,
sorry, don't want to confuse you. Okay, Doki Doki Literature Club is the name of the subject line. Tyler from Colorado again. I just wanted to get on here to mention this because when you guys were talking about doing graphic novels, I was literally thinking about Doki Doki Literature Club. Then your next email mentioned it. As a horror junkie, of course I've tried it. You guys have mentioned how you like games that break the fourth wall to mess with you, like Metal Gear Solid, making you switch controller ports. Doki does this really well at the end. I don't want to spoil anything for people playing it. I played it on Steam. I know it came out on console, but to be honest, I don't know how they will make it work on console the way it messed with you and what you had to do to change the game on PC. I guess I could just compare ending with someone in the Discord to find out, but it's definitely worth a try, and it does catch you way off guard if you don't spoil it for yourself. Sorry for the vague insight. Just wanted to mention it without spoiling it. P.S. Unlike console, Doki is free on Steam. Also, The Letter is a great horror visual novel, but more of an conventional horror compared to Doki. Mike, I look forward to you hopefully doing a show in Northern Colorado. Oh, I do. I want to go to Northern Colorado. I've played there before. And that was Tyler from Colorado's email. That's good. I'm going to play this game, Tyler. I'm going to scare myself next Halloween and play this game because people have been talking about it so much.
Sounds spooky.
Yeah. Maybe we could do it together. Maybe we could stream it.
Okay.
That'd be funny. Stream the two of us playing. I'll play it and you'll just be my fearless bodyguard, moral support. Does that work?
Sure.
But thank you for the email, Tyler in Colorado. I'm curious about this fourth wall. I haven't really looked up a lot of stuff on it because I don't want to spoil it for myself.
It sounds like something you want to experience without spoiling.
Exactly. I just know it gets real. It starts okay and gets real creepy somehow. That's all I know. But yeah. Do you want to read Victor's email?
Yeah. Victor here says, "Hey guys, big fan of your work. Was curious if you guys were planning on doing more on the Rare story. If not, still love the content you guys produce and can't wait to hear next week's episode." Yes, I would like to. I think we're rolling through the book right now, but if we get tired of it, I might take a break to talk a little bit more about Rare because I know we kind of left that one hanging. So I would like to get back to that one. So thank you for the email because that lets me know that there's at least one person out there who also wants to hear more about Rare. So thanks, Victor.
Yeah, I do too. I think the Rare podcast episodes we did were really fun too. Like I don't know a lot about Rare and I know you're a big fan, Tyler. So it's fun to hear you get passionate about something you love. But a lot of the Metal Gear Solid episodes, you know.
I love Metal Gear Solid.
I know you do. It's so great. All right, that was good. I have one more thing I'd like to read. This is not an email. This is actually a YouTube comment that I thought was really great on one of our videos. And this is from Micah, and here it goes. "I'm nearing 41 myself, so I'm about 10 years older than you guys. For me, it was the late 80s, early 90s. That was the golden age of arcades. In the days when the NES was king of the arcades, had games that were Super Nintendo level graphics or maybe even slightly better than the SNES. You could even still find arcades with classics like Donkey Kong, Pac-Man, Galaga, classic Atari, and early Nintendo titles. But then you had some classics also in mid to late 80s like Shinobi, Punch-Out, Rampage, Xenophobe, Arch Rivals, Double Dragon, Bad Dudes, Golden Axe, Legend of Cage, Bionic Commando, Strider, many of which you'll recognize as having some home version on the Nintendo or Genesis. But there was something about playing those better graphics in the arcade. Sometimes a completely different game, like the difference between Strider in the arcade and Strider for the NES or Bionic Commando. You talk about how you feel you get a nostalgia for a time you weren't even alive for. That feeling you get when you were in the 80s arcade, that was real. All the arcade cabs lined up next to each other, all the sounds, there was nothing else like it. It felt as like you were talking about arcades. Something needs to be said about pinball machines. Oh yeah, pinball machines.
Oh yeah, those are full of lights and sounds.
Even into the 90s, pinball machines were a fixture in arcades. There were some particularly good ones like Theater of Magic, Medieval Madness, Monster Bash, Addams Family, and The Twilight Zone. TV shows and franchises even now are getting into their own pinball tables like The Walking Dead, Stranger Things, Game of Thrones. I'm always on the lookout for pinball machines when I check out an arcade, because that's definitely an experience you don't normally have at home, is an actual physical pinball machine. Anyway, sorry for the rambling essay here. I'm kind of all over the place, but I just found your podcast on Spotify and came here to make a comment on this episode. Thank you, Micah. That's really, I just want to, I should have prefaced this before. He is commenting on the Death and Rebirth of Arcades episode we did on episode 177. And it was just cool to get someone talking about it who was there and living it,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because I just love this. I also love that pinball is getting a renaissance, and I do think we should talk more about pinball. That's what I said in my response, because we kind of talked about pinball at the very early stages of the podcast, because it's kind of covered in the first book, but we didn't really talk about it any more than that. And in Seattle, there is a pinball museum. So maybe I could go check that out one day and see what it's like. Anyway, that was a really good comment. Thank you, Micah. Thank you, everyone who emailed us. If you want to send us an email, you can go to codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. That's our email address. If you want to check out our Discord, you can email us, or you can go to my Twitter profile at Mecoletta, MECOLETTA. Click on the pinned tweet. That's a Discord link that never expires. And if you want to tweet Tyler, you can go to Sneaker Elf, ELPH for Elf. I think that's it.
All right.
We got it.
We got it.
All right. You want to say bye to everybody, Tyler?
Goodbye, everybody.